Ah, the Middle Ages, a time of prosperity and innovation for many nations. In South America, the Incas maintained a complex and well-kept road system and developed new techniques for terrace farming. In Asia, the Chinese had already invented gunpowder, silk, and the compass. In Africa, wealthy kingdoms thrived, forming vast trading empires. But we don't care about them. This video is about the sad little scrap of world right here that we call Europe. In Europe, the Middle Ages can be divided into three parts: the early, the high, and the late Middle Ages. The term Middle Ages is used to describe the period between the fall of Rome and the beginning of the Renaissance, or about 500 AD to 1500 AD. Feudalism was the social, political, and economic system that dominated medieval life. It was first brought into practice when William, Duke of Normandy, invaded England. What year was this? Well, why don't I let the history teachers tell you? 1066. 1066. Ugh, well, now that I've gotten that burned into your minds, I'll move on. Feudalism operated on the concept of vassalage, where lords gave a fief, or a plot of land, to someone in exchange for their loyalty. This person, known as a vassal, would fight for the lord in exchange for protection. This applied to most of the social classes. Nobility held lands given to them by the crown, and they in turn had their own vassals. At the lowest social class, the peasants lived under their lord and gave him homage, labor, and part of their produce, getting little in return. In this system, the rich stayed rich, the poor stayed poor, and there was virtually no social mobility. Because of this, only the rich, particularly those in the church, could afford education, since classes had to be paid for. As a result, the majority of the population was not only extremely poor, but was also very uneducated and stupid.
Are you suggesting coconuts migrate?
Because of this, the general populace relied on church officials to read and interpret the Bible for them. This leads me to my next point. In medieval Europe, the church was practically omnipotent. Peasants and royalty alike believed very strongly in Christianity. Peasants worked for free on church land, paid tithes of 10% of their income, and paid for baptisms, marriages, and burials. In short, everywhere you looked there was a church, and it was taking your money. Churches were bigger than palaces to remind people of its power. And since the uneducated peasants had nothing to do but work, starve, and blindly take in what the church tells you, people would basically eat, sleep, and breathe the church. And if you didn't, well, you'd go to this lovely place after your death. So what did the Catholic Church do with all the power and wealth they gained from their blind followers? They went to war! Toward the end of the 11th century, the Crusades began in order to expel the Muslim infidels from the Holy Land. In 1095, Pope Urban promised his loyal soldiers a place in heaven, along with other worldly rewards, and off they went to Jerusalem. Yeah, bad idea. No one ever won the Crusades, which continued until the end of the 15th century. Many thousands of people died in battle on each side, and in the end, the Christians didn't even get what they'd come for. But hey, consolation prize! The contact with the Muslims taught the Europeans many new things, like new ways to build and sail ships, and how to make and use compasses. They were also introduced to new things like silk, cotton, spices, and different forms of art and literature. And this last part can be seen as good or bad, depending on your political views. The Crusades helped to break down feudalism, but at the same time it increased the power of kings. Sometimes a noble would die in battle, or sell their land to go to war. These lost lands would pass right back to the king. So why does any of this matter? Why don't we just burn all records of the Middle Ages, swear an oath never to speak of it again, and cut it from all curriculums? Well, besides the fact that all of that would take a ridiculous amount of effort, the truth is, it actually does matter. It may not have been the best era ever, but without it, the Renaissance wouldn't have anything to go off of, and therefore would never have happened. Another contribution was universities. Once we reached the late 11th century, anyone could afford it, could go to Bologna or Paris and get a high-level education. Some other fun stuff we got from the Middle Ages were lowercase, illustrated books, glasses, and the Magna Carta, which put restrictions on the king's rule. All things considered, not bad.
So, the Middle Ages were a big deal and stuff, led to modern day, lots of idiots with tools in the field and idiots with bags of money on the thrones, blah blah blah. We all know you only care about the murder and gore, so what better to talk about than the Middle Ages' greatest legacy?
The plague!
The Black Plague can be traced back to small outbreaks that failed to do significant damage, but one strain survived in Mongolia. This Mongolian plague spread through Mongolian conquest and their usage of biological warfare. While the plague is mainly known for its devastating effects in Europe, it also impacted the Chinese, killing 35 million people. Fun fact with Phoebe, the Mongolians were some of the first to use biological warfare, and they would actually catapult plague victims into their enemies' cities, causing the plague to rapidly spread throughout Asia. The plague then traveled to Europe through traders and merchants, where it spread rapidly through the lack of hygiene and sanitation. I mean, really, people, take a bath. But anyways, the plague went gallivanting around wreaking havoc, and as everyone knows, it was spread through Fun fact again, while the plague was definitely spread through fleas, the rat part is questionable. Newer theories state it was actually gerbils carrying the disease. Also, it wasn't just the fleas spreading germs, the plague was also an airborne disease, so it spread like wildfire. The plague killed 25 million people in Europe, 1 in every 3. In fact, so many people died that gravediggers would go around collecting the bodies in a cart to be buried in a mass grave.
Bring out today!
The plague ravishing the continent confused and terrified the people, especially since doctors couldn't tell them what was causing it or how to cure or prevent the infection. In their desperation, some people turned towards witchcraft, others led a life of extravagance. I mean, hey, they were gonna die anyways. Still others took to whipping themselves as a way of repenting their sins. These people were known as flagellants. So what was the plague? Under the category of Black Death, there are 3 illnesses. The first and most deadly is the bubonic plague, named after the swelling or buboes that formed on the victims. The bubbles would pop and ooze, and within days the victim would be dead. This plague spread rapidly because a person was contagious before their symptoms appeared. Less common, but still deadly, the pneumonic plague would attack the respiratory system until the victim couldn't breathe, leading to death within 2 days. And there was the septicemic plague, which manifested itself just like frostbite, attacking the blood system until the extremities hardened and could be cracked off. The art that came out of the plague era maintained a theme of death and depression, as shown in this snippet of the poem In the Time of the Plague by Thomas Nash. Rich men trust not in wealth, gold cannot buy you health, physic himself must fade, all things to end are made. The plague full swift goes by, I am sick, I must die, Lord, have mercy on us. Beauty is but a flower, which wrinkles will devour, brightness falls from the air, queens have died young and fair, dust hath closed Helen's eyes, I am sick, I must die, Lord, have mercy on us. So why do we care about the plague? Sure, it wiped out 1/3 of the population, but so what? The answer? The plague changed everything. The farmers were dying, so crops were left to die, creating a famine. The merchants were dead, so trade decreased. The workers that were left wanted higher pay, which led to inflation. To combat inflation, nobles passed laws restricting high prices, leading to revolts and rebellions. So yeah, the plague was a big deal. The plague also managed to effectively switch the population of Europe from a Middle-Age mindset to the ideas of the Renaissance. The people were used to having God and the government explain everything that happened in the world, but the plague led many to start questioning God and eventually questioning authority and transitioning to a new era in history. Do you ever sing the song Ring Around the Rosie? You know, ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posy, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Well, that song is actually about the horrors of the plague. The rosy were red swollen rings around plague victims' eyes and neck. That pocket full of posy was to ward off the smell of death and possibly the disease itself. Ashes, ashes referred to the ashes of the cremated body, but was also sometimes a chew, referring to one of the first signs of the plague. We all fall down, read, we all fall dead. Well, there you have it, the Middle Ages and the plague. Toodaloo!